1 minute until showtime.
Oh my God. Are you kidding me? I thought I had the page loaded. Hey, good morning. Hi. Interesting topic this morning, isn't it? Very interesting topic because we're going to talk about something that is absolutely interesting.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, everybody, good morning. This is Harriet Kimmick with Down to Earth. It's a show in which we talk about everyday matters. It was just yesterday, I was giving a discourse on what we talk about, and it was amazing to me how people uh, were asking questions about, well, what do what's your podcast? And people were curious about how can I listen to you while I'm in the car, and how can I listen to you, and what do you talk about? People prayed for me and believed for me and encouraged me. I must say that I was very encouraged when I walked away from that conversation. It's not very often that you get a chance to go and speak to people and walk away feeling encouraged yourself, walk away feeling as if you've imparted or you've done something. But today, I wanted to talk about something that I'm sure my listeners all over the world can relate to. And before I do that, I just want to say thank you to everybody. We have listeners primarily in the United States, but we also have listeners in Canada, and we also have listeners in Namibia, South Africa, Denmark. I'm trying to remember the countries offhand. Bangladesh, pretty much the world. And I wanted to say a shout out to all of you. Thank you so much for joining in our podcast. We really do appreciate it. And thank you so much. I just want you to know that we know you're there and we're hearing and that you are listening. So I just wanted to say thank you to that. And I also wanted to say to those of you who continue to join us through this medium, that you download and subscribe to our show. Download and subscribe. It helps us to keep our show on the air. As you know, we're a listener supported broadcast, which means you get an opportunity to buy in. You get an opportunity to help us spread this news, to talk about the issues that matter. And you get an opportunity to tell others about what we're saying and what we're talking about. There's so many conversations that you could have today. And I'm so very grateful that you stopped by and you took the time out to hear what I have to say and to listen to what I have to say. And hopefully by the end of this conversation, it either encourages you or it changes your perspective or it gives you an additional way to look at another subject. So I thank you in advance for your support, and I look forward to being with you in many on this broadcast and in other forums. Thank you so much. But something a few weeks ago, I was in someone's car, and that doesn't happen very often, that I get a chance to scroll through my phone and to read articles of interest. So often, when I get a chance to read, I have to literally program myself to read. I have to schedule a time to read, right? And it's not very often nowadays. I used to walk with my iPad a lot. And then I felt like I was too connected, so I stopped. And then I realized that I go somewhere and I don't have anything to read. So recently I was in someone's car and I got a chance to read a New York Times article. I kid you not, about a man, Adam Newman, who started a company called New WeWork. Anybody heard of it? Well, I read the article and I kept reading all the related links because I didn't know what this guy sold. I couldn't tell what gift, what product he sold. I kept saying, what does he do? He wasn't a motivational speaker. He was not an author. So he wasn't, what did he contribute? So I kept trying to understand why the media itself and the New York Times in particular was so interested in what this guy had to say. I couldn't quite get it, and I still don't. So somebody's gonna have to help me out a little bit. So my daughter Alexandra, as you know, is a recent law graduate, and so I turned to her. I'm like, what is this all about? What do you know about this, and what is this all about? And she said, I'm glad you brought that up. And she sent me a link and started a conversation in our home about failing up. I literally, if you hear her point of view, I had to ask, what is failing up? Failing up. I'm like, how do you fail up? Because to me, if you fail, it's a downward spiral, right? So what is failing up? I am requiring, I need to know. I really couldn't understand it. So in listening to what she had to say and in reading the New York Times article, there were some things that became very, 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 very clear. And what became clear is that our society has a problem. Our society, as usual, we still have matters that we still have to work through. Now, the reason you're listening to me is because you like me, but you also like my ideas. Now, there are some people of color, for whom racism apparently is not a problem. They have internalized racism to the point where they say it's not someone's problem, it's your fault that racism happens to you. There are some people of color who make it seem like it doesn't happen to them and it's not your fault. So it doesn't really happen. Racism is just something made up, and oh, don't worry about it because I'm not one of those black persons, or I'm not one of those brown persons who has a problem with racism. And that's okay. That's how they internalize it, because in dealing with the systemic and endemic racism that exists in all spheres, that I guess that's how they cope. I guess that's how the best way they could cope. But I am the kind of person who I'm an observer of people. So I tend to stay back and look at how does this play out. So I'm going to give you some background about this. So there is a concept called failing up. And I'm glad you asked, what is failing up? And I'm going to read to you what it is. The concept is this. Failing up is the ability to advance your cause despite demonstrating mediocre talent. So my first thing was, mediocre people don't get ahead. You have to be exceptional to stand out. And then people were like, no, they're mediocre people get ahead all the time. They're the ones who get picked out because they're the ones who seem to be the most malleable. So I said, well, if you stand out, then you're not mediocre. There must be something about you that makes you stand out. So you're either charismatic. Charisma is a heck of a thing, isn't it? Charisma is almost a necessary ingredient. So they might have mediocre talent, but they have exceptional charisma. And it is that exceptional charisma that they can use to advance their cause. Right? Absolutely. So I'm going to give you the case of a guy named Adam Neumann, who is the CEO and founder of a company called WeWork. Prior to reading this New York Times article, I had never heard of this company before. But in reading about it, it highlights a problem that exists in the diaspora. The problem that exists is one of such deeply entrenched racism that it's almost inconceivable that stuff like this could happen. This guy had this concept that he would acquire real estate space and he would rent it out to startup companies, and they could create whatever workspace they want. So, the idea in today's marketplace is that a workspace that is employee driven, where it's kind of like a physical Facebook, kind of like a physical Twitter, a physical Instagram, where you are not confined by you must produce between 8 and 5, but you can talk about family, you can share pictures of family, and it's a more relaxed workspace. So you don't necessarily have to sit behind a desk. There are no walls. It's an open. So his idea was startups proliferate and thrive best in an environment where people are encouraged to think outside the box, where people are encouraged to explore their creativity. It's not a bad idea. It's a good idea. It's sort of how Donald Trump got started. Acquire real estate, get a lease, and then sublease it to other people. Not a bad idea at all. You're just like, wow, creative idea, make money on it, right? The problem with this guy is that he was so exceptionally charismatic that he began to have access to investors. And simply because he was white, he's from Israel, he was born in Israel. Because he had access to investors, he kept climbing. People began to take notice of his ideas. He was very charismatic. So he would be invited to cocktail parties and he could capture and dominate the room. So people wanted to be a part of what he was saying, right? People wanted to, sort of like just cling to him because here he was. So he created this idea and he rented out the Woolworth building in New York. And he got investors. He got SoftBank of Japan, who primarily funds tech startups. Did y'all know that? And the SoftBank in the owner's son gave him $1 billion, y'all. So this guy created an IPO on nothing. He didn't even own the building that his offices were in. And he created an IPO. It wasn't an app that you and I could say it improved our lives or changed our lives. It was just a real estate deal. He didn't buy it. He rented the spaces and then he subleased it to other startups. And you are like, great idea. What's the meat to it? So he got this investor to invest $1 billion into his startup. He created an IPO. And in the IPO, he was devalued from 47 billion to 7 billion. I'm like, how did he even get to be $1 billion? Listen to this. The deal he made with SoftBank was that he still, as the CEO and founder, he's still going to walk away, even though his company is declared bankruptcy. He's about to be bankrupt. He's facing federal lawsuits because he was a son of a tar to work with. He told one of his pregnant employees he had a private jet. Even that, he had the lifestyle. After he signed the $1 billion deal, he rode up in Manhattan in a Maybach, in a chauffeur-driven Maybach car. You know what that is, right? Rolling in the big life, blasting rap music. I kid you not, the things that you read about, this actually happened. Now, you and I are probably thinking of Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey and Sergey and so on, who had they been given $1 billion when they were starting up Facebook or Twitter, right? Or when they were starting up Yahoo or Google, can you imagine what $1 billion would have done to them? They gave this guy who had no substantive idea, nothing to work with. It wasn't a product. It wasn't tangible. Facebook and Twitter and so on. Somebody present you with that idea, no matter where you were in the world, you could look at it and see that this is something that could mushroom if people in the world had access to the internet. Let's face it, people in the US had access to the internet. That's all you needed. That was a viable market right there. That would sell the idea. But you look at him and this stupid idea that he had. And while it sounded feasible, how did he convince somebody to give him $1 billion? Well, that's exactly the issue. He convinced an investor to give him $1 billion. So he's still going to walk away from the company that is now defunct with, check this out, $1 billion cash and $187 million in consulting fees. This is why the rest of us say failing up. So now they're saying he's a failure because his company has imploded. Well, he didn't have the right management skills. He didn't have people skills. He broke the laws in terms of how he employed people. But that's not the issue. He failed upwards of $1 billion because he literally made $1 billion, even though his company has imploded. That's my issue. But here's the thing. Before these people failed, that's why we say failing up only works for white males. Because before he failed, he got a chance to access funding for his startup. How many black and brown people are out there with ideas for a startup and can't get funding? Raise your hand. I'm raising mine. I have a startup. I have 2 startups. I'm starting up. Can't get funding. Not because of credit. They turn you down. They won't give you a line of credit. Downtown Detroit and Midtown Detroit is filled with white people who got a line of credit from Chase Bank and Royal Bank and every kind of bank there is to start something that you and I know in 5-6 months is not viable. There's so many. There's a yoga studio on every corner. There is a juice bar on every corner. You and I know they're not going to last 5 years, but they got access to funding to start. That's what we call institutionalized endemic racism. And we have to, I feel that I have to talk about it. It might not be you. It's not for you. It's not for you. It's not for you, because maybe this doesn't affect you, or maybe you feel uncomfortable talking about it because you don't want to be pilloried or pointed out. But here's the thing. It is still what it is. It's racism. And I'm still at the end of this going to ask you for your support, because if I were white and I had blue eyes, so I'm going to put in blue contacts or green. Which one you think would suit me best? Blue contacts or green contacts? I'm going to change my hair and get a total blonde wig and put in blue or green contacts. And people are going to assume that I'm white. Earlier this year, in winter, when I first started streaming, people from all over the world thought I was white. Do you know how many views I got? I got hundreds of views. They thought I was white. The more they realized that I'm not white was the more they disappeared. Think about that. And there are some black people who are going to say, well, but they don't want to talk about it because, it makes them uncomfortable. And they're like, well, I made my millions from kicking football. I made my millions from basketball. I made my millions. Yeah, because you were still part of this stereotype that if you're black, your job is to entertain us. So yeah, they're going to pay you because they want you to entertain them. So I am informing, and they're like, that's not the job of a person of color. You don't inform us. You don't have the intellectual capability to inform us. So a black inventor, you don't have the intellect that is capable of creating something that I can use. That is exactly the problem. That is institutionalized endemic racism. And that's the racism that black and brown graduates from college face. Because now the college has given you a certificate saying that you have studied in this, you're qualified in this. And the white society is saying, we're not going to accept that. I don't care which college gives it to you. You're still not better than the white persons just because of the color of the skin. This guy, Adam Newman, had no idea. He had nothing. And there are many stories and examples of how white men fail up. And it's no big deal. But before they fail up, he succeeded, because he succeeded at what is the other prominent example of white people failing up? Elizabeth Theranos. Remember her? How on God's green earth she came up with an idea. She didn't invent anything. She came up with an idea that she was going to, and she sold it to Walgreens. How she got a chance to access the folks at Walgreens to carry out her testing and so on. Turns out she was not the developer of the idea. And she got people at the upper echelon of the society and got investors to invest in her program. Then afterwards, they said she failed, but she got a chance to succeed first. How? Institutionalized endemic racism. And we've got to talk about this, because if we're ever going to move forward, we have to face the ugly that is within us. We have to talk about our own disgusting ideas, as disgusting as it might be to us, but we have to confront our own biases, our own prejudices that exist within us. You are interviewing candidates for a job, and a black person, a brown person, or whatever color, as long as they're a non-white, let's just say a non-white person, presents themselves, and you scorn them because of how you've been socialized. No matter how great they are, you're still thinking at the back of your mind, all they're supposed to do is produce a rap video holding their groin and yo, 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 and smoking weed and calling women bitches. And if she's a woman, well, all she's good for is for you to look at her booty, and she's to bow down before you because that's all she's good for. And you don't want to touch her. And if you're a white woman, you definitely want to prove to her that you have the upper hand. This is why you don't see many white women on my broadcast, because they're offended that I dare, as a woman of color, come and talk with authority about these issues. They don't want to pay for that. They don't want to see that, because at the back of their minds, young or old, they're thinking, that is supposed to be what I do. I can't begin to tell you how many times I go out and people say stuff like that to me. I should be doing that. I can do that. You never knew you could do that till I show up. But you think that it is your right of way. You see what I'm saying? Food for thought, isn't it? How many of you are on this broadcast this morning? Well, 1, 2, 3, about 20 of you, if I'm lucky, right? About 20 of you. Okay. When you are done with this broadcast, share this. Matter of fact, tweet somebody. Tell them to watch this. Keep repeating it and retweeting this, because this is a conversation that we must talk about. Failing up is only works for people who are white. It doesn't work for non-whites, because first you have to have access to the funding to get your program or your startup off. I am not going to lie to you. I really didn't think that I was going to be faced with the kind of racism that I have encountered in getting my startup off the ground. I didn't think it would be so exponentially out there. But the kind of racism that I've encountered from white women, sometimes, I tell you the honest truth, it required great discipline for me not to slap at people and not to talk back to people. I had to conduct myself within the modicum of decency, because I would be falling into a microaggression that is a stereotype of what people of color are. This society is as racist as it comes. It is what it is. And I know that there are people everybody who is white is not racist. But for many people, many of us who are black and brown and getting a program off the ground, we are confronted with racism. It is what it is. There are all kinds of stereotypes. For instance, if I were to come on and say, I'm going to talk about sex, and I'm going to talk about people having sex, my timeline would be filled with people, because they've stereotyped me that that's all I should talk about. I am to denigrate my self, my humanity, and talk only about sex and show off my body. One guy once told me to show him, I am to give him a peep show and show him my breasts. I kid you not. Because he thinks that he literally said it on my timeline, that that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm not supposed to talk about the issues that matter. I'm supposed to only be confined and stay in my limited realm of talking about sex. Isn't that something? So filling up, the concept of it only applies to white people. Only a white person can go to school and then come up with an idea. First of all, you get a chance to go to school in the first place. Secondly, you can come up with an idea and you get access to funding, like all these myriad, anywhere in America today. Walk into any midtown or any urban area, and you'll see some form of gentrification taking place. As soon as white people come in, they get access to mortgages that colored people who have been living in those areas for decades can't get. All of a sudden, they get a mortgage that can pay, redecorate, and re-renovate the buildings that they want to buy. Next thing you know, there are like 100 million yoga studios. There are hundreds of juice bars and other, current trendy forms to eat, none meat, none this, none that, all kinds of stuff. They get access to loans. And then before you know it, no, some brown people are moving in who get their family to co-sign on a loan or so on and give them some startup cash. But they don't get the following. And their families are going to continue. There's one woman in Detroit. She has a company called the Detroit Cookie Company. Her husband helped her get off the ground. She was working in PR and couldn't get anywhere. Why would she get anywhere? She's a woman of color. So I guess she's began to see the writing on the wall that no matter how good, no matter how talented she wasn't going to get where she wants. Sometimes people don't always speak up and tell you the real reason because it is so, and their families will tell you, don't talk about it. It doesn't make sense. You don't want to alienate anybody and so on. Those are all forms of microaggression. It's kind of like how the slave owners used to do it. They push it on you and then tell you, you dare to talk about it. How dare you talk about it? We're not going to help you. They still have those little councils where a group of 4 men go in a room or a group of 7 men or a group of 10 men, and they go in a room and they decide whom they're going to help, whom they're going to support. And if your name is not on the list, well, it sucks to be you. They know exactly how the system is structured because they are the system. They set it up. They designed it. They perpetuate the system. So sucks to be you. You're going to become a victim of the system. And then they use terms like marginalized to marginalize you. They push you out of the mainstream. A few days ago, I was at a round table in Flint. And they were talking about it was a Department of Energy sponsored event. But there was a gentleman there from the Flint Water and Sewage Department. And this gentleman was talking about how water in Flint had become an affordability issue. And he was explaining why. He said power, energy to move the motors, chemicals, the cost of chemicals to treat the water, and labor, the cost of labor. Then somebody else said aging infrastructure. So I asked the question, why has water affordability become an issue? And something that everybody is aware of is that the people who run these systems are white. And in a lot of urban areas through the country, this has become a problem where people through generations of not being able to work and turning to drugs are more available and more accessible and more affordable than it is to buy healthy food to eat in most communities across the country. You do know that. That's by design. That's not an accident. And so people have less money to spend on the things they need, like fresh water, clean water, access to clean water. And the people who run these systems divert the funds to their own pet projects that they tell their friends to go apply to get a grant. So they divert the funds that has been provided by the federal government, by the state government to fix the aging infrastructure. They divert the funds and create their own pet projects so their friends can benefit. And then the problem still exists within the water. And the delivery of fresh, clean water. And then they tell colored people, you don't try hard enough. You're not doing enough. Does that sound familiar? If that sounds familiar, radio silence. I kind of left that hanging because if that sounds familiar, that's exactly the problem we're facing. It's institutionalized endemic racism. Right? Why on God's green earth did this become a problem, right? Why did this become a problem to others? It shouldn't have happened. This young man, they say he's very tall. Adam Newman, he's 6'5". I don't know. I saw one picture of him. He's dressed in pants with a skirt over it, or something that looks like a, what did we used to call those things? Skirts. You know, it's a short, but it's a skirt chance. White people choose which black people they want to associate with and whom they want to help. Right? They're very good at choosing that. If they want a black person who is malleable, whom they can control, and whom they can control the narrative through. They want you to go around and spread word about them that does not make it seem that they want that, and they'll pay them well for it. And people are like, I'm getting paid either way. I don't care. Right? Right? But look at it this way. Failing up as a concept, it does not work for people of color. First of all, we don't get a chance to be near it anyway. We don't get a chance to have backup funding. When I first explained it, I struggled with the concept when I first learned of it, because I'm like, it's good, it's good to have a backup plan in terms of funders. In case one falls through, you have another plan, right? And I kid you not, when I first started, I had no idea. I started to create awareness and to provide a physical service like shelter to human trafficking victims, specifically adult females over 18 who had been traumatized as a result of being taken as children, being trafficked as children. I didn't think that that's an idea. That was a colorless thing to me. That's what I naively thought. I thought that had nothing to do with color, because that impacted black, white, and everybody else. You know what I mean? You know what shocked me? My friends, you know what shocked me? The fact that the people who were giving grants were all white women. And because they were white women, and I was the black woman who started this organization called the Exodus Foundation, and I walked into meetings, presented my ideas, I was given zero funding. So finally, I started calling people out. I'm like, you're racist. What's your idea? Why wouldn't you support this? I was getting a contract with an organization that could have been lucrative to keep us going and to keep us alive. And the white people who showed up to sign off on it, because the girl who initially looked at it said, I love this is going to work, blah, blah, blah. They eventually fired her, by the way. I kid you not. They literally came and they were like, they looked like, and it took me a while to realize that what I was encountering was racism, because I had to ask myself, I am a studied person. I'm a learned person. I've been around business most of my life. I'm not new to this. If I come up with this, I have thought it through. Do you see where I'm coming from? So what happened here? Took me a while to realize that I was encountering good old-fashioned racism. Then I had the nerve to go write a formula. I decided to partner with a big church in Detroit. I wrote the program. They asked for a proposal. I said, let's go pursue the program. They said, this is the guy who handles it, little tweak that he is. Went to him. He took my idea and gave it, him and the people at the church and the leadership of the church, including the pastor's wife, took my idea and gave it to somebody else in the church. Got the money, you all. And then had the nerve to call out people in front of me while I'm sitting in the damn church. Like I'm an idiot. Like I'm nobody. If you see me at that church again, you all need to hold me accountable and slap me upside the head. Slap me upside the head and to get some sense into you. I kid you not. The contract was for $250,000. Look at me, people. Look at me. That's what other people, the same people, same color skin. Just because you show up and you have a better idea, they took my idea. They've been sitting there for years. I never came up with it. And then I have the idea and I went to them and thought they were people of integrity. Integrity, my foot. If you see me walk back into that church, you know something, I have completely lost my mind. I've gone off the rails. I kid you not. So failing up, the concept of it, only works for white people. I told you about the woman, Elizabeth Theranos. You need to look her up. She's a girl who came up with the idea that she could test your blood at home. You didn't have to go into a lab to do it. And then you would send the results back. So she worked out a deal with Walgreens where you could take the results to Walgreens and Walgreens would do the processing for her. But she got funding and billions of dollars in funding. She had an IPO. She got billions of dollars in funding before people realized that, wait a minute, this doesn't even work well. Wait a minute. This is not even her idea. When the guy whose idea it was came forward, it was unbelievable. Do you see what I'm talking about? It's called racism. The only thing that this society wants us to perform in is you better entertain me. So the Nicki Minaj's and the Beyonce's and they'll pay them billions of dollars as long as they stay in their lane, which is to entertain. Show us your booty. I don't care if you are a woman or if you're a mother or someone's wife. You're still nothing to me but a set of booty and breasts. Like I told you, I had people on my timeline. When I first started my podcast earlier this year, when I restarted, they told me, quite frankly, they told me to flash my breasts. When I said no, I lost 300 viewers on Twitter, one leg. To this day, I kid you not. I kid you not. Because the only realm I'm supposed to fit in, I'm either bouncing a ball or I'm playing with somebody's balls. Or show me what you're going to show me so you get my balls excited. And for white women, you're only supposed to entertain us. You're not supposed to inform us. You're not supposed to be in a position of authority over us. And for those of you who think that this does not apply to you, then you're going to find out. And this happens to black and brown people across the spectrum. This is not just a black thing. This is for brown people as well. They just internalize it different. They're just now beginning to emerge from the recoil of pain and hurt and call it what it is. So until all black and brown voices start calling it what it is, it's not going to change. This is why nowadays I am looking at black banks and I am looking at people who looking for companies who are brown and black. And if I see them at their business, guess what I'm doing? I'm supporting them because I know exactly what it takes to start up. I know the fights that they have had to gone through and the loops they have had to gone through. People have frankly asked me to compromise myself. And I'm like, I think I have issues with that. Well, you don't want the money badly enough. And I'm like, I do want the money, but I don't know that I can live with myself. I want to be able to live with myself. Well, do you want the money or not? If you want the money, this is what you're going to say. This is what you're going to do. And I have to look at them and say, well, you've been saying it. You don't seem to be better. So what guarantees do I have that if I say it with you, then I'm going to get it? Because it doesn't seem to work for you because you're still confined within the color. If you don't believe me, take a look at this. For you as a black and brown person to be on the same panel, you have to have doctor in front of your name if you're black and brown. But the white person is on the panel with a bachelor's degree. Or if you really check, it was a degree from a community college that may or may not exist. But you as a black or brown person, you got to have 2 degrees to be there. That is racism. But you know what you tell yourself? I am the only black and brown face in this space. So at least we're here. But you're confined. You have to report to them. They still control what you say, what you do. The narrative is what they agree on for you to say. You can't talk about it. If you start talking about it, they control you by correcting it. And if you don't conform to what they want, then they get rid of you and put another brown or black face in the same space that is going to reiterate their monologue. It is what it is, ain't it? Talk about it, y'all. Talk about it. It is what it is. So now you're going to ask them, where do we go from here? Girls and guys, we got to stand up and talk up. This is why I say you have Facebook, get on your representatives page and start asking questions. How many black and brown people work in your organization in positions of leadership? You bank at this bank, ask them how many black and brown people are in positions of leadership with autonomy. Are they just a figurehead? And the white person who is over them, or the white person who is in a similar capacity, is the one who speaks up, is the one who gets the call. You just give them a title. Have you ever noticed? They're going to hire somebody who heads up diversity and inclusion, and it's a black and brown person. Sure. And then they go to meetings and everybody's like, yeah, we're diverse and we're being inclusive to everyone. Yeah, we are. And then you actually look around and you're like, not really. When you start saying this is how this should be, they're like, that's just too much work. Okay, I hear you. And nothing gets done. You know what I'm trying to say? We're still fighting the same battle. You know what it's called? Racism. That's what it's called. We're still fighting racism. It hasn't gone away. It hasn't crept under the bridge. It's just another form. You can change the figurehead because that's all it is. The people who are in the systems, they're what? The figureheads. They're like those little bobbleheads. Their job is to perpetuate the system. So you don't fight against the people in the system. It's the system that you have to change. It's the system that needs changing. I didn't realize how much racism had factored into it until a guy who writes federal grants and who worked for the feds, he actually sat me down earlier this year and told me what it was. My first grant writer for the Exodus Foundation was a white girl. You know what she told me? She said, Harriet, I'm going to be honest with you. They're not going to give you the grants. And I listened to her and I said, why wouldn't they? Because I'm looking at it, I'm analyzing it and looking at it from an analytical point of view that it has to do with a program. Is it the program? She said, no, nothing is wrong with the program. She said, they're not going to give it because it's you. So I was offended because I thought it was something about Harriet Kamek, the person. What she was saying to me was they're not going to give it to me because of my color, my ethnicity. So I paid her. She did write it. She said, I'm still going to write it. But she said, I can tell you right now, they're not going to give you. I never got it. So I responded to one of them. They said I didn't do this. I responded to them. I gave it to them. They stopped responding. They changed the person out. Because guess what? It was a lie in the first place. I'm like, how you would give me a grant for this, but you're giving somebody a grant to start a bridal shop on Jefferson in Detroit, and it's a white person. A white person starting a bridal shop on Jefferson in Detroit? Come on, people. Half the times I drove past the place, it's closed up. They took the grant money and left. They got $250,000 or 90, something like that. I kid you not. Then somebody else started a spa. A black woman started a spa that she was only running part-time. And she said she got $10,000. And she said, go start it. They're giving the money away. What she didn't tell me was that she had a cousin who worked in the system, and the cousin pushed the paperwork through. So I don't have a cousin because I wasn't born here. So I don't have no relatives. So it didn't work for me. I kid you not. I kid you not. The system is the problem. It's not the figureheads. It's the system. And until we change the system, we're not going to see meaningful, effective change. How do we change the system? We're going to have to go back to BRAC tactics. How does a system get changed? Because as long as the narrative continues to be that white people, male and female, have access to funding, it means that black and brown people won't. Let me ask you something. You really think that Twitter and Facebook, that black and brown people didn't have the idea? Let me help you out. I read an article a few years ago, maybe a year or two ago, that Uber was actually started. The founder of Uber, what we call Uber, was actually in Nigeria and saw and asked for a taxi. And the taxi driver opened his phone and opened an app and requested a cab for him to go to his next point. He came back to the States and started Uber. And everybody's like, what a grand idea. No. Black and brown people have the same idea. And what they do is they take it and they run with it and they get lauded for it. And everybody's like, oh, they're such a great person. And this is just so, they're so smart. No, they stole that. When I see something though, I'm like, who paid the price for it? Because I know how life works. So what they wanted me to do was to disappear out of the game. If they frustrate me long enough, then I get out of the game. But they don't know me. Like I said, I didn't come here to count cows. I came to drink the milk. Y'all know what that means, right? There's going to be a while. We got a while to go, right? We ain't giving up, right? So no matter how, so you're a black and brown person, you're talented, you're gifted, you even worked in corporate America. You got as far as you could go, and then you realized they weren't going to take you any further. So you left and you said, well, I can have this career in something else. And you're like, I'm not getting any hits. Why? This color of your skin. Just look around you and you will see what we're talking about. Right? So I'm one of those persons. I'm a speaker, right? So when you invite me to speak somewhere, I go out and, you know, I ask you some questions before I get there, so I have an idea what you're looking for and what's happening and what is relevant to the people in your area. Yeah. So I'm not one of those persons who go out with a lot of notes and so on. I just talk. I'm gifted that way. Apparently that's a problem for others. Do you see what I'm saying? So you have to make up in your mind. So this accounts for the marginalization that you see. Black and brown people apply for credit. And the white person who works as a waitress has $100,000 credit on their credit limit on their credit cards. And the black person who is an engineer can't raise a mortgage for $250,000. They have to suck up their life and pay $2,500 a month when the white person is paying $750 a month on a $250,000 mortgage. I kid you not. Look it up. Look it up. Look it up. It's startling. So your house is valued at $330,000. You put some equity into it. So you're financing $200,000, $250,000. So you're paying $1,250 a month. And you think that that's okay? No. The white person is paying half what you're paying with less down payment. That is systemic oppression. So oppression today does not come with Jim Crow laws. They changed the name of it. It doesn't exist as Jim Crow laws, but it's still there. It's being perpetuated all the time. And sometimes, you know, we get along to go along. We go along to get along and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, we'll talk another day about some other stuff. And you go along to get along because sometimes it's just too much. You know, you feel like, man, I just want to live. Can I just live? Some black people are like, I just want to live. And they adopt the mannerisms of white people and the speech patterns. And so they feel this pressure to be the face of the race. I don't feel no pressure to be no face of no race. I am who I am. Do you, as a white person, feel pressure to be the face of your race? So why are you looking at me as the face of my race? What is my race? I'm of the human race, if that's what you want to call it. I am human. Is that what you are? I'm just saying. Go look up the story. It's on the New York Times. This guy. Up until now, I still can't tell you what product this guy sold. All I know, he was extremely charismatic to the extent that a banker from Japan who commonly funds tech products and tech startups gave this guy $1 billion for an idea. He took over the Woolworth building in New York. He didn't own it. He didn't buy it. He just rented it out. And they gave it to him because he could talk. He had the gift of gab. And he talked his way into $4 billion. Right now, he's going to walk away from the company that he bankrupted because he's facing a number of federal lawsuits from his employees. But before you categorize him as a failure, he's walking away with $1 billion cash and $187 million in consulting fees. He didn't fail, did he? No, he didn't fail. He made money. He got $1 billion. For the rest of eternity, it's still $1 billion. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's still $1 billion. Still $1 billion. That's not failing, is it? Not if you got $1 billion of the big ones. Billion with a B. That's not failing. And the point is that this only happens to white folks. It doesn't happen to non-white folks. Non-white folks get sent to jail with handcuffs on and do 28 years for having an affair with your administrative assistant. While the current mayor of Detroit had an affair, Mayor Duggan, the mayor of Detroit, he's white, he had an affair with a woman, paraded the woman in front of people. She started a nonprofit. He told his employees to give her a $350,000 grant. And he didn't go to jail. He's not doing 28 years. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Kwame Kilpatrick, I'm not a fan. I still think he got a wonderful opportunity and did not use it. So I'm not a fan. But the facts are the facts. And the facts speak loudly for themselves. A former mayor of Detroit, who is black, failed monumentally, had an affair with someone who worked for him. And he's doing 28 years behind bars and accused of, and they have proof he racketeered and everything. The current mayor, who is white. The current mayor is white. And the current mayor had an affair, broadcasted all over media in this part of in this city. And guess what? He's still running things. Didn't get locked up. Didn't go to court. He's not even nowhere near. Oh, it's just a moral failing on his part. And you want to tell me there isn't such a thing as systemic, institutionalized racism? Tell me about it. Why then? Black and brown people graduate with masters in engineering. And why, if they're hired, if they are hired, they earn $20,000 to $30,000 less than their white counterparts? Tell me. Tell me. Why aren't we seeing more and more black prosecutors in the justice system? There needs to be more black and brown people as judges, more black and brown people who are running government agencies. Yes, I don't care about the few who have failed. You probably set them up to fail. You didn't pay them enough, but you were paying the other guy. When I first came to Detroit, I worked for Middle Eastern people. And I'm going to close on this to show you how the system is skewed. I worked for Middle Eastern people who primarily came from other parts of the world. And their contention was that for them to even work for the big three, they had to have a master's degree. So they had to, despite the fact that they had a bachelor's in engineering and most of them had years of experience in working as engineers, for them to work, they had to have a master's degree. Whereas the white person graduated from Kettering University, used to be called GM University. I kid you not. Back in those good old days, when you were hired As an engineer, they gave you a house and they gave you a car and everything. For these Middle Eastern and black folks to get it, these black and brown people to get it, they had to have a master's degree. You have to be, it was what our ancestors used to tell us, you have to be 20 times better. That is unfair. That is the system that we have to change. The system. It's the system, folks. It's the system. The same system that made Adam Newman believe that if he had access to funding, that he could make $1 billion by convincing people that he had a workable idea. And a black and brown person with a better idea and who has talent to execute the idea can't even get close to the funders because of this. The color of the skin is still determining your advancement. Like the guy on Twitter told me months ago, apparently I'm only good for showing off my boobs, right? That's all I'm supposed to do. I'm not supposed to come and inform and educate. I'm not supposed to come and talk about the issues that matter. All I'm supposed to do is flash him my boobs. I kid you not. It made me so self-conscious, folks, that I started doing this. I became so self-conscious that I started covering up. I kid you not. Because I started saying, it made me stop posting pictures because I started thinking, maybe maybe I need to look at what I'm posting. So I started posting pictures only of my face. I wouldn't even show you a picture of me full body. Think about that. Right? We got to change that, people. And it starts here. We are the ones who are going to have to change it. We have to start thinking different. Yeah. It's going to require a different set of thoughts. You're going to have to start thinking different. And when you start thinking different, you're going to act on it. Right? I got to go. It's beyond time to go. I've exceeded my time limit. Right? But I do want you to do me a favor. Go to my website, theexodusfoundation.com. We're a listener-supported broadcast. Obviously, I can't continue to talk about these things if you don't help me to continue to talk about it, because by now you realize I'm not getting the funding from the people who don't look like me. So I ask you kindly to go to theexodusfoundation.com. Right on my homepage, I am asking you for your support. Make a donation. Help us to continue to do the things. I put my money where my mouth is. When I wanted to help people, I put my money where my mouth is. So I ask you kindly to go and help us to keep this program on the air. Thank you so much for your support. This will be available in a few minutes. It will be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Continue to help us to keep this on the air by going to Spotify. Download and subscribe. Look up Down to Earth with Harriet Kamek. And go and spot and help us to stay on the air. Thank you so much, everybody. I got to go. Thanks so much. Be blessed, everybody. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. Be blessed. Hey, thank you, my faithful viewer. Thank you so much.